get pretty passionate about the whole mountain mover concept, but also the state of our industry. And attending your event that you spoke at was eye-opening for me to understand lean a little better, because prior to that, I just saw it as stopwatch guy. And like you literally talked about, no, what if your lean principle is going to observe those guys and realizing they need more help, not less. You don't need to take a body away. You need to add a body because you're watching them wrestle something that's over their shoulders. And I'm like, okay, I could get behind this. And we just went off on a tangent. The bar's low in our industry. And with the bar being low, what a profound opportunity to go positively impact this industry, because the way we change our industry is through each individual.
Oh yeah, back with part 2 of my conversation with Mr. Kevin Carey. And like listening to it again while I was editing in preparation for you, it became ultra clear that I know exactly who I am going to be reaching out to for a job if this construction mind shifter thing don't work out. You're probably gonna get some chills. Definitely going to get some motivation. And if you're leading a team in construction, you best be taking some notes, because Kevin's words are words to lead by. And I ain't playing. You're going to want to replay this and share this with all your friends, because he brings it. And before you get the 1-2 punch from Mr. Kevin Carey, I'm going to give a shout out to L&M family member, Mr. Matt Graves, the Himalayan Haas construction Yeti. He shared this somewhere on the interwebs, and I kind of pulled it because it was public, so I don't think I need to get permission, but we'll see. Matt says, Jesse's one of those guys that I chat with on a fairly regular basis, and every time I do, I'm left feeling like I want to run through the wall and go change the world for the better. Hell yeah, because that is the goal. And one particular reason I wanted to shout out my buddy Mr. Matt is because he and I are going to be having a live audio room next Tuesday, which is, December 19th at 5 p.m. Central on the LinkedIn audio live thing, talking about our secrets, lessons learned, cheat codes, all of the above, as construction content creators. And so if you got a minute on your drive home, pop up that LinkedIn, jump in the thing, and we'd be happy to hear from you and share whatever goofiness we think we know. The mountain mover concept, I think that's now the name of your company. So you have a construction company named Mountain Mover. You've written the book, and I think you do public. So how big is this mountain mover concept?
For me, it's literally biblical. So it's a pretty big deal to me. Moving mountains, it's rooted in scripture, Matthew 17:20, have faith to move mountains. And we're not talking about the physical structures. We're talking about the things we wrestle in life that we just talked about, some of those in this conversation, but identifying your mountains. It might be a mindset thing. It might be an identity thing. It might be a season you're going through. It might be a diagnosis. And what we're aiming for is to help move those mountains in your life. And moving mountains might not necessarily, like with a bad diagnosis, it might not be the miracle of it going away. It might be the miracle of your mindset shifting towards something that's purpose driven, that makes you happier and more fulfilled and can positively impact the people around you. And so it is the sun of my solar system. So podcast 1720. Mountain Movers Consulting Company, Mountain Mover Facades. Our purpose is literally listed in the name of our specialty contracting name. And then when I'm at home, you better believe I'm trying to build mountain movers at home too. And so it's every planet. It serves every planet in my solar system. And there's so much to the name of our construction company, Mountain Mover Facades, because facades is just the vehicle. We're glass guys and gals. We know how to do glass. That is the vehicle to our purpose of creating an army of mountain movers. And the bar in construction is unfortunately super low. And so we started this company at the beginning of October. And one of the biggest things I wondered is the trades, the craftsmen and women, are the good ones, the not good, like the good-hearted ones, are they going to want to come? And when some of these key ones, when they heard the announcement, they said, just let me know when you're ready. And it goes to show, like, they know what we stand for,
Yep.
and they know that we care about them. And they know that they're not just a number when they come on this team. They're a part of our tribe. And that matters to me, quite honestly, more than performance. Like, I could go hire a high performer that's going to beat down our people, but I'm not going to, because it's not worth it. And what's cool about the reputation that we're already building in the market, people are wrestling with that. Man, I wonder if they'll hire me. I know I treat people like crap. The answer is no, if we know that.
Right.
Even if that means we're going to be faster on our metrics, that doesn't achieve our purpose. We're in this together, and we're in this to build people up, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of come up. Like, diversity, we want everybody to bring their true self here, feel valued, feel empowered, and move the mountains in their life. And so, obviously, you could tell I get pretty passionate about the whole mountain mover concept, but also the state of our industry. And attending your event that you spoke at was eye-opening for me to understand lean a little better, because prior to that, I just saw it as stopwatch guy. And like, you literally talked about, no, what if your lean principle is going to observe those guys and realizing they need more help, not less. You don't need to take a body away. You need to add a body, because you're watching them wrestle something that's over their shoulders. And I'm like, okay, I could get behind this. And we just went off on a tangent. The bar's low in our industry. And with the bar being low, what a profound opportunity to go positively impact this industry, because the way we change our industry is through each individual. And when an individual's changed, their team around them changes. And when the team around them changes, the company changes. And when one company changes, more companies changes. That leads to an actual industry shift. But we got to individually do it. We all got to own our part in it.
Kevin, I got chills, brother. Like 100%. The future I see is that the leaders within organizations that figure out how to demonstrate appreciation for the men and women that do the work are going to smoke the competition. And what you just said is proof of that, right? Like, your recruitment is simple. They're going to treat me better, and they don't hire people that treat people poorly. In this age where I can make money sitting at home selling pictures of my feet, it's getting silly. But Kevin, when we were younger, we had to go to the mall to fill out an application to get a job to make money. So we had to push the lawnmower down the street, knock on doors. Can I wash your car? You don't have to do that anymore. You can make money at home, sitting where nobody's yelling at you, nobody's treating you like garbage, and make some money. You may not make millions, but you can make some money. You can generate income that way. Why would I go work for an organization where the people treat me like garbage? That lean thing, I used to be the clock, the timer, and yep, we got to cut people out. And until I saw, like, no, dummy, it's about serving. I have all this knowledge and I've weaponized it. That's why nobody likes me. That's why nobody's inviting me to the party.
Yeah.
If I use the knowledge to serve others and minimize the pain, and to your point, what happens when we minimize the burden and the stress that people are experiencing every day? They now have capacity to learn, grow, and serve. That's the point. And little by little, man, you've seen it. I've seen it traveling around the country, working in different places. The people, the leaders, I wish I could say companies, because that would be beautiful. And I think maybe yours is probably yours and our buddy Keon are the two organizations that are there, right? Like, they are a company that treat people differently. They're a company that provide with a meaningful experience where people feel appreciated. The rest of the companies, they say it on their website and it ends there. And it always goes down to the leader, the people out there leading the crews, leading the projects, the influencers, the decision makers. They're the ones that are going to make or break that culture, if you will. Now, in your book, you talk about at one point, it is during the pandemic, you had one goal, and that goal was to be $1 in the black. And some people would turn their nose up to that goal. So can you describe what that was for those people that haven't decided to buy the book? Now they're going to decide after you described it. And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, that whole season was in the glazing industry. Our whip is long term. So when we're awarded a job, it's probably a year, 6 months to 12 months before we're even accruing revenue. And so when the pandemic first hit, that year was still solid. It was the following year that things really started drying up. And we did this, we used to do and still do, just in a different journey now, a yearly retreat in January. And we were looking at a hard hitting year financially, and decided to, at this retreat, with it, this is an all hands on deck, anything from foreman level in the shop and field all the way up. And so brought an easel out to this lake house and just drew up financials of, all right, here's our revenue, here's our cogs, here's the overhead, just building a very simple P&L statement. And then the number at the end, you saw the wide eyes, because people were like, that's not good. That is not good, because it was a deep number in the red. And we spent the following couple hours on, what are we going to do? What is our anthem here? And so the theme for the year, we had two: mission $1, which if we can make $1 this year, what a profound success. And then the goal board for that year was every step counts. So every decision, every ounce of help, every bid, every material order, like everything we're doing matters. And so how do we lean into that? And so not only did we end that year in the black, but it set up this launch pad for the following year, because we were so connected on a common goal, a common theme, a common purpose, and united, regardless of department, that it just spiked us. And that came with its own growing pains. But even my vision was small with that. I wasn't trying to come up with something grand to build the future. I was focused on that year. And we are in a grind survival season. And we did it together. And I couldn't do it without all of those awesome people. But just to watch the unity in that strategic retreat was magical. You got to include your people. You got to be transparent with them. You got to share what's the cost. You got to share what's the goal. What are we up against? And if you're trying to wrestle with that as the leader by yourself, and you're making decisions and having emotional decisions based on the fear of what's happening on that proverbial easel, they're not going to know any better. And they're just going to think that you're just treating people bad, and you haven't welcomed people into that journey so they can help in that journey.
Yeah, it's another thing that I get to do. First, I'll just say you're amazing, bro. You get me hyped, and particularly because of your approach to business. Not just because you're an author and motivator, but because of your mindset around business. I've worked with a lot of leaders that have been in that exact situation, and they did not adjust the goal. They said, figure it out. These are our goals. I don't want your excuses. And but one of my takeaways was, man, we're in a creek and not the good one. And so our goal is going to be $1 in the black, which how big that was for the organization. And you also know how big that was in terms of like swallowing down and having to manage some ego and some pride and et cetera. But what it sounds like it did, was it helped get everybody on board and understand, like, hey, this is a purposeful thing. If we hit this, we know how hard it's going to be. There's going to be a celebration, but it really means something way more than just, you got to go sell, you got to improve production, you got to do better, you got to, we still have to do those things, but we're going to adjust the goal. Now, here's a question. You said it. Every step counts. Now, when organizations are faced with like revenue problems and earnings problems, especially revenue, it's easy for them to get in a situation where they take every job. And so here's my question: is in that situation, what criteria did you use, or even do you use now, to make sure you're not selecting work that causes you to deviate and detach from your company and personal values?
Oh, that's a great question. You're full of great questions. I think much like life, with your own personal journey, your character is revealed in the tough times. It's easy to show a good face when you're on the peaks, but what does it look like in the valleys? Same with business. Like when we were hitting that season, I don't know why it's a lot of companies or leaders' natural tendency to abandon the things that got them there. Most importantly, the people. So like, why would you shift from focusing on them and like completely pivot the mindset and the strategy to financial or die when financials are the byproduct of the people? So this was an opportunity to fully lean in, and not so much the funny thing is the byproduct also became sales, but it was our performance on jobs. Hey, we sold this job at X margin. That's the basement. No profit fade whatsoever. We got to crush this thing. We have more resources than typically we do to execute less work. We got to hammer it. And we ended up pulling up several of those jobs rather than profit fade. We pulled up the budget, but that performance like auto sold our next jobs.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, we're willing, you got our back. We're going to sign you up. And so there's a couple things there looking in the past. Looking forward, we have bumpers on what we're trying to go after. And I'm using a baseball analogy. We're going to hit doubles. We want to hit doubles. And so we're not going to compete in the 0 to probably 500,000 contract area. 500 to 6 million is where we're trying to live. And the big towers, all that sort of stuff, the home runs, we're not ready for that yet. And owning that. And I used to failures looking in the mirror. I'd go straight into a contractor's office with my slugger double barrel bat. Like I'm going straight for grand slam times. And some of the biggest jobs, and you and I have been on one in particular, that cause the biggest headaches. If the other team is not being proactive with their processes, that rolls downhill, and then you start being more reactive, and it causes chaos. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's not our lane right now, and we need to stay in this lane. And it's a very difficult thing to do, especially in this journey. We're in startup mode, and you get a job that's more of a home run in the analogy, and that dopamine hit comes, and you're like, oh yeah. But then you got to remember, to the earlier point we just said, tether a statement to it. At what cost? Yeah, that's a pretty building. But at the cost of profit fade, maybe you stroke a check for it, turnover, turmoil at your house. Is it worth doing that pretty thing if you're not ready for it? Of course not. So have a statement tethered to it, have bumpers. And what's fun is we're on tour right now going to GC's offices, and Texas is all about relationships and reputation. It really is. And they're latching on to the baseball analogy. They now know if this is a double, we're probably a good candidate for it. And we can't bid everything to every person. Our staff is like fractional to all the GCs out there. We got to protect what we're going after. And when we say we're going to go after it, though, just communicate it.
Yeah. I know the discipline it takes to detach from that big, sexy, high-profile project where everybody can see the vest and the signs and the hard hats from the highway. And I also know the pain of going after that damn thing. Now, I am fortunate in that I can say I didn't make that decision. It was made for me, but I know the pain, that growing pain, the revenue gain that kind of ends up happening, just keep selling revenue. Earnings are dwindling because we went after the big sexy thing instead of doubles, baby. Just hit them doubles. Phenomenal. I think the phenomenal takeaway there for hopefully some business leaders that are going to hear this is have the bumpers and ask the question, at what cost? What strain is this going to put on my people, on my family, on the business? Another thing, and I know people love hearing this, our GC brethren, this statement, because everybody is talking about how they finish on schedule and they finish on budget, right? That's the sell. And same question, at what cost? Because the GC staff is largely salary. So you have no idea how many hours those people put in to get on schedule and on budget. And what I mean by that, what is the cost? Failed marriages, substance abuse, addiction, right? The suicide thing that everybody's talking about. Nobody's saying we finished on schedule and on budget and 12 of our people got divorced. One person is on antidepressants and none of them had a vacation. They rescheduled, canceled dinners, missed recitals, missed ball games. Because all of those things are true too. All they say is on schedule and on budget. What do you think of that?
It's spot on. What is your currency? If your currency is just dollars and cents, maybe you won, but our currency is purpose. And so if we're living the literal name of our company, Mountain Movers, like we're focusing on bettering people's lives, not making them work to the bone and nights and weekends expected. And we're in startup mode. So that's a little bit of a urgent moment. We got this rocket ship does need to go straight up before it can go into orbit. There's no doubt about it. But those established companies, like, what are you driving towards? And so I'm a bit of a control freak. And one of the things that I never want, God willing, stripped away again is our purpose and our vision. And because it means everything to me. And so PE firm, none of that's trying to drive the top line up no matter what. We get to control those bumpers. And when you really reflect on this, our tradespeople that do work hourly and are job costed for so long, they've been beat down and working overtime that now all of a sudden they crave that overtime because they don't think there's another way to live. And part of moving mountains is, I'm not trying to strip away your money. Let me help you with financial freedom. Like, things that have nothing to do with construction. Let me prove to you that if we take you back from 60 hours a week to 40, you will still be able to live a good life financially.
Yep.
Your marriage improves, your family improves. You get to go to the ball games and recitals. And if we're doing 40s throughout the life of the project and 50 is like the exception, chances are we're performing at a high level on that job that's going to create future jobs that creates opportunity for promotion. So like, when you could crystal ball all of that, we build believers, but it has been our fault as office folk to build the opposite narrative out there that it's a must in order to live. And it's not. It's just, we created that narrative and now we're trying to unwind it a little bit, person by person.
Oh man. So what comes across is ownership, and it reminds me of one of the chapters in your book where you're talking about playing defense and playing offense. And when I heard that, I'm like, offense is ownership, meaning not I own the company, taking ownership for every decision that I make, for every action that I take or don't take, taking ownership of my contribution to the situation is offense. Now, you also touch on accountability in there, and that concept, I have a strained relationship with the word and the way people treat it. So I'd like to know, how do you think about accountability?
There is always an opportunity in every scenario for you to look in the mirror of a way you could have been better. So let me use a practical construction example. Somebody ordered the wrong glass, and I immediately, I would say you have no idea, but you absolutely have an idea of how easy of a mistake that is that causes major catastrophe. And so this girl ordered this glass, and I could take it out on her as her boss, or I could look in the mirror and say, what did she have to assume? What checks and balances do we not have? What was she just flying without a process? Like, there's a bunch of evaluations you can do as a leader to take ownership of that. And I love always like to make this principle consistent. Like, you have an up and down arrow, put communication up and assumption down. So at the root of all things, was there increased communication that was needed because an assumption was made? And when you start root causing a lot of mistakes that are made, I assumed she had it. I assumed he had it. I assumed this was the right glass because it was approved by the architect. Assume an assumption should be a cuss word in your process. If you've had to assume something, that should give you the chills a little bit. What kind of increased communication is needed? It almost feels fake at first when you try this on, and like, I know you made a mistake, right? I'm looking at Jesse and I'm like, I know he did this, but I'm trying this thing on for size. This is my fault. And then you like, it's like a fake it till you make it. That's probably healthy because it eventually leads to some freedom.
Yep.
You own it. And you're like, it's my fault. Like, I should have done X. And all of a sudden, more and more, you start figuring out, oh, you are at fault. Like there was something you could have done better. And that person that made that mistake, they're probably beating themselves up more than anybody else possibly could. So it's an opportunity to train. It's an opportunity to show grace. And obviously there's limitations to that if the person's not getting it repeatedly, and maybe there's a shift that's needed. But there's always an evaluation in the mirror, even when it comes to that point. If you had to let somebody go from your business, well, what did your hiring look like? Look in the mirror. You hired that person. Man, there's always some ownership, and look in the mirror, regardless of where you're at in the organization, where you're at in life. And when you can start doing that, you get more control over your life, because it's harder to control what other people are doing. It's easiest to control what you are doing. So with every condition and scenario, increase your communication, and also look in the mirror. As scary as that can be at times, like there's always an opportunity to be better with who you are.
Yeah. So, Kevin, what came across there was personal accountability. And I had a feeling that's where you were, because I'm in the same boat. You cannot hold me accountable for anything. I am either an accountable person or not. And I am accountable to the commitments that I have made. I am accountable to the outcomes of my decisions, etc. And it drives me, but I shouldn't say it that way. There's a general practice from a lot of people that talk about the problem is we don't have accountability. And I'm like, that's true. But I think the way they're confusing accountability with consequences. And that's a different thing. What are your thoughts on that?
The biggest thing that I started thinking about is, if you're the leader, it doesn't matter if you're the leader, but I'm going to try it for this example. If you're the leader and you show accountability, I botched that. You've just given permission to the people around you to show accountability. But if you act like you got it all together, you're setting an unrealistic standard to the people around you. This is what I'm expecting. My expectation is perfection. And I get it. Like, strive for perfection. And then even if you fall short, it's excellence, whatever those quotes are. But you also got to communicate when you screw up. Like it's an opportunity to own it and increase your accountability to not let it happen again, to try and root cause it. But you've given your people permission to now run with that. And man, that is something we coach, because what happens is, in that proactive versus reactive, you make a mistake and you're too scared to tell anybody, and then you start sweeping it under the rug. And then all of a sudden it compiles, and rather than addressing it in the moment, this thing that wasn't fireable is now fireable because it percolated, it built, it grew. And now all of a sudden we're telling the GC the day we were supposed to be there, like a train wreck of an answer. And it could have been, we found out 3 weeks ago, and yet communication up, assumption down. 3 weeks ago, I call the GC and say, hey man, we screwed up, and it's going to be ugly. And I don't have a solution for you right now, but we're working on it. And just know that we're taking this very serious. And in the moment, like, I'm not trying to make this a movie where you get a big hug at the end. He's probably, they're going to yell and scream and swear, maybe, like all the things are coming. But in the longevity of relationship and reputation, they will remember that you flagged it when it was an issue and you did whatever you could. And what's funny about construction is, in some weird, wacky way, that might enhance your relationship with that person, because nobody's perfect. Construction is still a very human business, and there's going to be mistakes made. And it's like, did they own it? Did they come with solutions? How did they finish on the other side of those mistakes? Just own it. Even if you don't have a solution, just raise the flag.
Yep. So 3 things come through, Kevin. 1, bad news early is good news. 2, it's another data point on the value of vulnerability. Because calling a GC before you even out there to say, hey, we dropped the ball, we stepped in it, that's huge vulnerability. And the third thing is, people remember how you finish more than how they went through the whole thing. What do you think about that third point?
I agree completely. I can give you countless examples of let's call it a mountain in your life, right? Or a mountain in your business. Now, let's go from personal to business. That mountain is that ugly job, the ugly duckling, the one that got you. But let's say with high character, you're continuing to fight through it. I've had times where I've thought in my head, so and so will never go with us again. And it was quite honestly the exact opposite. It was, man, yeah, we screwed up. We had 39 other subcontractors screwing up around every corner on this job. Like, you guys owned it and you reacted and you showed effort and tenacity and honesty. No, you're now our preferred person. Because that's anti-historical to our industry. You're scratching your head. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But then put yourself in that person's shoes. So as a specialty contractor, if I have a vendor that screwed up but owned their mistake, the exact same thing we're saying, I'm going to trust them a lot more with the next one rather than the one like I'm beating down the door like, hey, my material's supposed to be here today, where is it? And that's the first time that person's looking into the order status, and you're like, oh, like this, that's one I'm going to distance myself from. So it's proactive communication. And that's tying to your earlier point. That's how playing offense is vulnerability and accountability.
100%. Now, you mentioned those jobs, right? The ones that you learned the most from, which are like never the good ones or highly profitable ones, or at least in my history. And you're very gracious in sharing some of your come up. With that comes the dark shadow. And you talk about this in your book, the dark shadow hanging over your shoulders. What is the dark shadow and how can people manage that?
Yeah, the dark shadow for me could be like the mountain of temptation, the mountain of being reactionary to things. My shadow can be a false identity that I'm still holding on to, like a fake ID, like this person of the past, like where that's not even me anymore yet. Like if I let that shadow grow around me, I'll start thinking of items from the past, almost to the point, not almost to the point where my heart starts beating real fast and I get flushed. Because the temptation gets so strong. And what I've been using when that shadow builds up is, it's not in the book, but something that I've been doing some really deep work on lately is pre-decisions of mindset. And so identifying some areas of weakness in my life, like we work on all these things, right? We work on processes, SOPs, building, goals, purpose, but then we let our noggin run wild. And what's going on in your brain, it's, am I watching the movie or am I writing the script? So am I just sitting back when I wake up and just letting the things come into my brain and I process them as I come to them? Or am I taking it to it and saying, no, we're not going to think about that? And so areas of weakness for me are, the first one I wrestled with was being present. I felt like I was either always in the past or always in the future. And that shadow is the past trying to devour me. And I had one statement for that area of weakness. What is my next thought? So that came from a book, The Power of Now. You read an entire book, and if you get one sentence from it, I guess it works. Yes. And so when my brain's going crazy, I go, what is my next thought? And just for a millisecond, I feel empty. And I actually just felt a peace and calm just saying it now.
Yeah.
And it's not one and done. I have to do it hundreds of times. But what it uncovered was, I'm not just wrestling with the past or future, I'm wrestling with fantasy land, like things that will never happen, that I have this fake argument with this person that cut me off in traffic, or the HOA guy that is terrorizing our neighborhood by calling everybody out and like thinking about strangling the person. I'm like, what is this? And so like at Fantasyland, I have to tag, that's an area of weakness. Now, what is my statement? And it's, what's the big deal? And all of a sudden, I now have the statement to disarm it. So, sorry, I'm very long-winded in my answers. For if you got that shadow that feels like, and he or she, that shadow is coming usually when you're trying to do better, and usually when you're on the cusp of a breakthrough, that shadow gets bigger and bigger. Identify that shadow, and then what is a statement you could say to lower that shadow and drop it down? And let me tell you, I have an onion layer of like 7, 8, 9 different areas of weakness that I have statements to all of them, but it started with one. It started with being present. And I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm not sleeping at night. And it's being present. It's not a light switch that I could just turn off at the end of the day. I need to work it throughout the day in order to give me a better chance to sleep. But then that uncovered fantasy land, anger, temptation, people over God. Like there's a lot of discovery. And there's just start with one. Identify what that shadow is that creeps up on you, and just know that's a mountain, that's an area of weakness. And what kind of statement can you say inside your brain or out loud to somebody to help fight it?
And Kevin, you have been ultra generous in terms of the value that you've shared in this conversation. And I know you're going to shift some minds of the L&M family. And I want to know, what is the promise you are intended to be?
The promise I'm intended to be
Yes.
is living out my purpose. And my purpose is building an army of mountain movers, one person at a time, and removing myself from that purpose and just trying to become the best version of me that I can be so I can help others. And that's my goal. That's my life's mission. And I lean into it as hard as I can each day. I don't always get it right, but when I do fall down, I dust myself off and I get back up, and I don't stay down for long. And it's a purpose worth fighting for, because I'll never be there. And I don't want to go back to what I was. So all the more reason to keep fighting for helping people. And a lot of people need help. And I would just encourage you, if you're facing mountains in your life, identify them, understand that you can get through it. I don't care what it is. You can get through it with the help of the people around you and working some of the tools, tips, and tricks that we're talking about today, because you're worth it. And you have so much more to offer this world than you can possibly imagine. And it'll blow your mind if you lean into something bigger than yourself.
Amazing. Amazing. So let's say somebody right now, they're like, oh my God, I need more of Kevin. Where do they go? Where do they get the podcast? Where do they get the book? Where do they get the public speaking events, consulting, construction services, all of the above?
So I have, for the speaking and the book, mountainmoverarmy.com, and the book Mountain Mover Manual. It's on Amazon, it's on Audible and Kindle. So we have the three options available. And then for the glazing company, it's mountainmoverfacades.com. So that's my home base. That's my baby, that we get to live out the purpose, not just in talking, but walking. So I'm super excited about that as well. And man, it's been a fun conversation, Jesse. I'm glad you asked me to be a part of it, and love hearing your ideas. I'll show you. I got Post-its everywhere from things, nuggets that you were dropping. Like, I need to lean back into that. If we move past it, it's always learning, man. And so I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Likewise, Kevin. I hope you had fun. I think you said you did. And I think we're going to have to hang out. I'm going to have to find an excuse to come harass you and kick some ideas around with you here in the future sometime.
Done.
What did I tell you? That Kevin Carey, man, he got me all lit up. I don't know if you could tell that I was pretty enthused by the topics and subjects that we covered, particularly when we started talking about this lean stuff. And, really hearing it for the second and third time was very meaningful to me, because he explained in a part of this conversation how some folks kind of treat lean, right? There's some people that totally ignore the human being and are only focused on improving the process and streamlining outcomes. My heart was tickled a bit when he mentioned that my presentation, or what he picked up from what I was laying down in terms of lean, was that it's entirely focused on making things better for the men and women that are doing the work. And Sweat Equity Improvement, which happens to be the sponsor of this episode, is a system specifically designed to help us understand how to improve the work, focused on making it better for the people that are doing the work. Q1 2024 registration is open for virtual Sweat Equity Improvement. The first night of class is January 10th. It's going to be online at 6 p.m. Central. And there's sign up now. There's only 9 seats left. I hope that you'll be signing up. I hope that you'll come out. And if not, I still love you. Be cool, and we'll talk at you next time. Peace.